City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs, co-posted the Committee of the Whole, met in council chambers Thursday, May 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice this meeting was posted on May 14th, 2025 at 12:55 p.m. In attendance are all members of the committee. From the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilor Merkel, Councilor Davis, Councilor Harvey, and Council President Prosnewski. We also have, from the city, we have Beth Renard, City Solicitor, Lori Stewart, the Housing Stability Coordinator, Amanda Chincola, Deputy Planning Director, Lisa Peterson, the Chief of Staff. So this is a continuation of the previous meeting, and there was a number of things that were asked for, questions that councilors had, and I think Lori has worked really hard to provide some of those materials. So if you're okay with it, Lori, I'll have you come up and just sort of talk through some of the materials that were provided. Or Amanda. Or Beth.
Okay, let's see. What was provided was the previous PowerPoint that got put into the packet, which was presented at the last committee meeting. I'm not sure that everything that I requested to be put into the folder made it into the folder, but I also had prepared some data for Councilor Gerslow and Councilor Morcillo regarding trying to find out if the people that had converted to condos in Salem, if they were property owners who were more mom and pop, or if they were investors. And what I didn't see that in the folder, but what I did tell Councilor Gerslow and Councilor Morcillo is that it's very hard to tell from the bankers and trade database that we get from the assessor whether or not these are investors or mom and pop. I also saw that the updated, I guess Beth had made some changes to the ordinance, and do you want to, I'm going to let Beth go over those changes.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a chance to talk to the attorney from Boston who had been advising us along the way relative to that look-forward period. And basically, it's a cautionary tale from him. There aren't really hard, fast, any real situations that he could refer to in Somerville or Boston. So what we are proposing now is to change that 2-year look ahead to a 1-year look ahead.
Can you point out the section in the ordinance that's active
Sure.
now?
There are 2 sections. They're highlighted in yellow in your packet online. The first one is Section 7 of...
Is that 51.4?
Yep, that's correct. 7 of 51.4. That highlighted yellow, that last paragraph. And then it shows up again in 51.5.
Paragraph 2.
Also
This is a change from two years to 1 year, is that correct?
yes.
And can you just talk through the reason for that change again?
So we had, because of this cautionary tale that we had from the attorney from Boston, he suggested a 2-year look forward. And then after the last meeting, we spoke about it internally, spoke with him about it, and where we couldn't find any real examples from other communities that this was in fact a problem, it is something that the group is still concerned about. So we thought 1 year would be more reasonable than 2 years to hold the property owner responsible.
Open up to questions from the council, or from the committee. Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 quick things. I found 2 typos, so I just want to get that on the record right now. In Relocation payments, number 4, relocation payments, it's near the end. In section A, at the end of that first paragraph, you're talking about tenants with a disability are low to moderate income or qualify as, it says, adult tenants. I think you mean older adult tenants. So we need to include older. That could be a real problem.
Can you point out the start where that is?
Yeah, I wish these were numbered. So it's 4 pages from the end. It's the easiest way to say it.
It's number 4, where the change from 2 years to 1 year is number 2.
Yeah.
So if you just go
So-
down 2
so the
more
next page.
paragraphs. Yep.
And it's section A there. And it's talking about tenants who are entitled to a longer. So first of all, do you see it, Chair? Okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to better. No, next page. Number 4? Do you see number 4? Okay. First paragraph, 4A, under relocation payments. The very end, okay, the very end, it says qualify as adult tenants. It should say as older adult tenants. So please insert the word older in front of adult. And then the second one. Oh. Then the second one was in section E. This is just a grammar. Section E, right below that. It says, near the end again, it says, the line that says that they has agreed, it should say have agreed. Does everybody see that? It's just a tense issue. Okay, those are the 2 things I found.
Any questions about the changes that Beth mentioned? Any other general questions for Councilor Gerslow?
Thank you, Chair. Laurie, when you sent that graph about how many condos were converted last year, there's some inaccuracies on that chart, especially 143 and 140.
Councilor Gerslow, could you talk into the microphone?
143 and 145 Derby Street. There was never any rental units there. It was actually a business, Captain Dusty's, which they knocked down, and they made 5 units. So I'm wondering if there's any other units on that chart, because you're trying to show that there's a big rush in people trying to convert condos, where in fact, they actually weren't rental units to begin with. I'm wondering on that chart, out of 54, I found 5 right off the bat. So can we just go through that maybe and point out which ones were actually never were a rental unit?
Well, actually, Councilor Gerslow, I think Amanda may be trying to pull that up. I wasn't expecting to go over the Excel spreadsheet line item by line item. I apologize if I made a mistake in copying and pasting. What essentially I got is called, it's a big Excel spreadsheet called Bankers and Tradesmen, and I did a lot of copying and pasting. The reason that I did that was not to prove that there's a big rush. I wasn't trying to falsify the number of condos.
I didn't say you're falsifying, it's just inaccuracies.
What I was trying to provide that information to you and Councilor Marcillo for was to show you that there's not really any way to be able to tell who is a mom and pop landlord and who is an investor, because that was a concern that you had both raised, and I think someone else as well.
I still do. And another question, when say you have tenants, like 4 tenants on the lease, they're all separate, they're not together, how do you do that for relocation payments? So I know people that are 4 roommates, not married to each other or anything, and they're all on the lease. So if somebody comes to do a condo, what is the relocation payments? Is it $24,000 or is it just $6,000 that they have to disperse amongst themselves?
That's an excellent question, Councilor Gerslow. It's, the relocation payments in our ordinance are per household. So if you have 4 unrelated tenants, they're entitled to $6,000 or $8,000, and they would have to split it. The state ordinance, 527 from the Acts of 1983, the relocation payments in that are per tenant. So it's $750 or $1,000, but it's per tenant. Ours are per household.
Per household, okay, thank you.
Questions from the council? Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make another motion. Or do we want to vote on the stuff in front of us first?
If you want, are you wanting to make a motion on the?
I want to make another amendment. So I'm thinking that maybe we should vote on the stuff that.
Yeah, let's take a vote on the amendment that's in front of us now. Is there any other questions or comments on the amendment that's in front of us right now? Any motions? Councilor Morsillo.
Just to clarify, the amendments in front of us are the ones in yellow from Ms. Renard, and then the 2 that I just mentioned? Because I think we voted on the other things, the red lines at the previous meeting.
Yeah, so they're just the 2 highlighted yellow around the 1 year versus 2 years, or 2 years versus 1 year, and the 2 grammatical errors.
Okay, I think I can do this. Let me just find the section. Okay, my motion is that we amend section 51.4, number 7, to add the second paragraph in yellow on our papers here. Then section 51-5, section 2, the second paragraph that was added. And then the two edits in section number 4, relocation payments that were mentioned tonight.
Second.
All right, Councilor Morsillo moves to accept the amendments in section 51.4, section 51.5, and the errors, the corrections to the errors in section 4, seconded by Councilor Varela. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. All right, Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. So I brought this up at the last meeting, and since then I've had a great conversation with Lori Stewart about the relocation benefits. So I just want to explain what I'm going to do first. When myself and the other councilors served on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, and we formulated the original template or framework, one of the things that we talked about a lot was the inability for a tenant to be able to afford the cost of moving. It used to be, I don't know the date, but it used to be that the state only mandated that the tenant would have to pay 2 out of the 3, first, last, or security. And now they may have to pay all 3. And, you know, as we know what our average rents are, it is really expensive. It could, you know, for a 1-bedroom, it could approach, you know, $9,000, $10,000. And in the original work that we did, we wanted to pay 50% prior to the move out, the property owner to the tenant, and 50% after. And we actually had guidelines, up to 15 days before and 15 days after. So if we go back to the relocation payments, which is where Councilor Morsillo found the older, and we go down to E, where it says relocation benefits shall be paid to the tenant, I am moving that we insert right after tenant, $4,000 15 days prior to the move-out date, and $4,000, and then continue within 10 days after the date on which the tenant vacates the unit.
Second.
Can you repeat your motion again?
My motion is that under E,
Yep.
and I'm going to insert it after relocation benefits shall be paid to the tenants, and then $4,000 15 days prior to the move-out date, and $4,000, and then it just continues within 10 days. So the words that I'm asking to assert is 4,000, 15 days prior to the move-out date, and 4,000.
So it would read, relocation benefits shall be paid to the tenant $4,000 15 days prior to the moving date, and $4,000 within 10 days after the date on which the tenant vacates.
Clarification.
Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. You're raising the relocation fee, but you haven't changed it in the other paragraph. Is that your intent to change the relocation fee that's being paid?
It says in A, relocation benefit of $8,000 per unit.
For those special classes, it's $6,000 for every other one.
I'm apologizing. I will, thank you, Councilor Marcillo, 3,000, 3,000.
So 50% and 50%.
I've got people who are not speaking into the microphone, yelling at me. Okay, so I'm going to amend it, thanks to the clarifications that three councilors offered. 50% 15 days prior to the move-out date, and 50%, and then it continues after that. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, so just for clarity, relocation benefits shall be paid to the tenant 50% 15 days prior to moving, and 50% within 10 days after the date on which the tenant vacates. Any discussion? I think this was seconded by Councilor Varela, by the way. Yep, Councilor Jerslow. Oh, you want to second that? Oh. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't understand the $6,000 relocation. I know they say first, last, and moving fees or security deposit. If you're in your apartment, whether you're staying there or moving, you have your first month's rent. So why are you doing first month's rent? Everybody will have your first month's rent. I don't understand that. You should take out at least $2,000.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Yeah, that is, everyone should have their next month's rent. I agree with that. That's the next month's rent. That's not the first month's rent. But one of the things that we talked about in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board meetings when we were doing this is that it's actually not just first, last, and security. There's a lot of costs. You might have to hire a broker. You have moving costs. You might have to hire a mover or someone to help you. There's a lot of costs associated with moving. And this is $6,000. If the average one-bedroom in Salem is going for $2,200, okay, you're already at $6,600. So all I'm saying is that we thought that giving someone a portion of that, so we're not asking for the entire first, last, and security, we're just asking for something. So if it's $6,600 and they have the next month's rent and $3,000, they're still only at $5,200. So it's still less, but it's really difficult to think that someone in Salem who has been asked to move out for a conversion is going to just have whatever the money is, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 readily available. That's why I'm making the motion.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Councilor Chair Hepworth. I would just also comment from a renter's perspective that you often need to have two simultaneous months, right? You need to have the one you're in, the one that you're going to pay to stay in the month during which you're moving, and then the first in cash up front to give to the landlord prior to your entry date. And so it's not like consecutive first and last months, it's all piled. That's why, because most average people don't have that cash simultaneously stacked, right? To be able to access it at the same time, for multiple months at the same day, right? And that's what renters face. Yeah, okay. Well, then I guess I would like clarification on the question then, because renters need these things simultaneously. It's not like one feeds the next.
Councilor Jerslow.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was a landlord of a three-family, and you get some people don't even need a security deposit. I have many friends and neighbors that own 2 and 3 families. Sometimes they don't even ask for the last month's rent. I just think this is an exorbitant amount of somebody that is just not a developer to come in and ask that person. They might be in some financial situation that they have to convert one of their units. They may live in the house, and maybe their spouse dies, and they have to convert a unit. Can they come up with all this money to give to the person? The person would have the next month's rent. They'll get a security deposit back. I just don't think that this amount. I think Boston at $750 or $1,000, well, that's okay. But I think this is way too much. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Councilor Cohen, Councilor Harvey, then Councilor Merkel.
So I own or occupy a 4-family in Salem. I'm probably about 45 to 60% of market rate on all my apartments. I really make money. But if I sold one of my 1-bedrooms as a condo, right now the market can bear, well over $300,000, and I think my apartments are pretty nice, and I might be able to get a little more. And I brought this up at the last meeting. I actually did the calculation. It's less than 1.8%. And of all the things that we talk about with housing, we're talking about rezoning and the MBTA Communities Act and ADUs and everything, and none of those mandate the building of housing, okay? It enables housing. I'm most concerned about the people who live in Salem who are being displaced, they're being priced out, they don't have a lot of, we're enabling more time and giving people notice, but I'm really worried about how many people who live in Salem. It's a very high ratio of people in Salem who are tenants, who are renters, who really are struggling and would like to stay in Salem. And I'm more worried about them, no offense, than people like me who own a multifamily.
Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair, not being a member of the committee. I have to somewhat agree with Councilor Jerislow. Perfect example is if, just say I invested in a multifamily 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden my spouse dies, and the only way I could stay in my own house is to convert that first unit into a condo and sell it. One, it's going to cost me to convert the condo. Two, it's gotten to the point where they don't even make sense to buy an investment property nowadays, because it's gotten to the point where you're better off renting. You have more rights as a renter than you do as a property owner. I mean, I bought a piece of property 20 years ago, and now all of a sudden I'm being told what I can and cannot do with my property because of the so-called, the housing crisis that everybody keeps talking about. And it's just, I feel that it's not fair to the landlords that possibly bought that house when they had kids and then they had a family, and they bought it because they had the supplemental rent to help pay the mortgage, and now they're at that point. I mean, granted, I get it, there are investors that come in and buy these properties, but there's got to be something we can do to differentiate somebody that's owned that property for a certain amount of time that needs to convert that into a condo so that they can actually stay here instead of them being priced out, being tax-wise and everything else, and having to move out of their house and basically selling their house to an investor that can afford to buy the house. Because you can't buy a 2-family house in the city of Salem for less than $1 million right now. But yet, I might own it and want to be able to convert that condo so that I can stay in that house that I purchased as a family home 30 years ago. Thank you.
Councilor Merkel, and then Councilor Davis. And I'll ask the folks in the audience to please respect the rules of the council chambers and not applaud.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. Not being a member of the committee, I'd like to express my support for the amounts proposed in this ordinance for the move. I do a lot of work in this space in a volunteer capacity, and I haven't known of anyone being able to move with $6,000. It's exorbitant out there. I don't know anybody that moves to a new apartment and doesn't have an increase in the rent because the market is so tight. And I don't want to just repeat what my other counselors said, so I just want to reflect on Counselor Cohen and Counselor Watson-Felt's comments on the very high amount of value in a condo today. They're worth a lot of money. And also with the other comments that were expressed on how it is piled on how much you have to come up with to land yourself with a roof over your head. And regardless, of the circumstances of the owner turning these into condos, it still results in a very valuable unit being created. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Hepworth. I would not support lowering the payment relocation fees. I think that if we want to kind of nickel and dime, what we're talking about, what should be and shouldn't be included here, first, last, and security aren't the only relocation costs when you have to move, right? We could talk about broker's fees here. We could talk about the cost of movers. We could talk about the costs associated with having to leave the job that's close to where you live. We could talk about having to get, pay more for transportation because you're moving to a different part of the city or out of the city. So I think there's actually a pretty middle ground approach that we're doing here. I had a separate question, and I apologize, I was not at the last meeting, so maybe this was answered before, but was curious the reasoning why we would be excluding the language as containing 2 or more units. Just curious about that. There are, rentals that are just 1 unit, so just curious if there was any thought to that. Thank you.
Lori or Amanda, do you want to address that? I assume that has to do with the state law, which was 4 or more, right? And this was trying to make it applicable to Salem.
Correct. That is, it was just recently amended with the Affordable Homes Act, and those are the requirements by the state. I think Amanda has.
Yeah, thanks. This is Amanda Chincola with the Planning Department. So we were thinking about this, and we couldn't think of situations where a single unit, a single family home would be converted into a condo, or very, very rarely. The only situations we could think of are if there's maybe multiple properties on the same lot, but that's so rare and far between. So where we see condo conversions happening, it's 2 units and more, not single-family homes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Councilor Cohen. Sorry? Yeah, we'll take public comment before we have the final vote. Councilor Prosniewski.
Thank you, not being a member of the committee, Mr. Chair. After listening to all the testimony and some of the scenarios that may be proposed, I didn't think of it until some of the councilors made mention that we have a disparity between homeowners that are living in these units and developers that are buying them to make money. When you take a homeowner that lives in a 2-family and they're converting one of their units into a condo because whether they want to retire or whether their spouse dies or they just want to be able to have the money. They may not have the money on hand to be able to dish out at that point, to be able to help somebody move that amount of money. Maybe if it's contingent upon the sale, maybe, now you're forcing this homeowner to go out and get a loan for $6,000 or $6,600 in order to help them relocate, when it seems to me that the homeowner who is living in that house, who doesn't have a lot of money, now is forced into a situation where, geez, you know, it may be easier for me to sell my unit. Now, he's selling his unit to developers who are going to make it into 2 condos. Now, all of a sudden, he's displaced. He's got to go out and find something because he couldn't afford to do what we're kind of pushing on him to do. It sounds like a rare situation, but the reason I'm making the point is because there's a disparity between people who are doing this for investment or people who are doing it for a need. So I just think there should be a little bit more conversation on that. Thank you.
Councilor Cohen, Councilor Morcillo, and then Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I respectfully disagree with that. And I'm going to use one example, which is kind of personal, which is me. I'm on fixed income. I'm retired. I already said tonight that I don't make any money on my house, and yet I want all my units to be safe and comfortable. I put mini splits in the apartments. I do everything I can, taking advantage of whatever incentives I can. And, you know, I think anyone here is invited to come check out my place. I think I have really nice units that I have, you know, invested in. And I just look at this as math. Right now, condos are selling at a high amount. So whether you own or occupy it, you want to stay in your house through your retirement or whatever, or you're an investor who comes in and purchases a place, you're going to buy a 1-bedroom for $350,000, and $6,000 is 1.6% of that. And this idea that we don't have money to, up front is kind of like a conundrum for me, because we're saying that the person who owns the property doesn't have enough money to turn it into a condo, but we know that the tenant doesn't have enough money to potentially move. And I know for my place, like if I decide when I move out, if I move out to turn my units into condos, that even though they're nice apartments, I might have to redo a bathroom or something. I know that just to get to that point, to make the property more saleable, I'm going to have to spend money. I just think that this is a reasonable way of compensating someone who is going to, in most cases, have difficulty staying in Salem. Thank you.
Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. Again, full disclosure, I own a 2-family home. I live in the home. My daughter lives downstairs. It's an investment just like anyone else's home that they own. It is an investment. It may come to a point where I am on my own and I decide to condo. This just becomes part of the cost of creating the condos. It's not cheap to create a condo. You have to separate all the electrical. You have to do all the permits. You have to do everything to create 2 units. This just becomes a $6,000 cost on the bill, which is much more than that, which is why most people, in my neighborhood at least, have sold their homes, have taken their $1 million and have gone somewhere else. You're not talking about, they're forced to sell. Sure, they're forced to sell, but they end up with $1 million in their pocket, right? That's not the same as a tenant in this housing market who then needs to go out and find a new place to live. And we're trying to find the balance here. Of course, it's going to cost them more than $6,000 to find a new place, because a lot of these 2- and 3-family homes, the rents are very affordable, right? Because tenants have lived there a long time. The people bought these houses decades ago. They don't need the $2,000, $3,000 a month in income. So the tenants are paying a very affordable income. Well, they're probably not going to be able to do that once they're displaced to create this condo. So the $6,000 in my mind is just added on to the cost of creating condos in your home. That's all it is. Along with all the permitting fees, everything else that you have to do, all the electrical work, all the plumbing work, everything. It's an investment just like when you sell your home. Of course, you end up putting in more money than when you were living there. New paint everywhere and fixing the things that you never fixed in the 20 years that you lived there. Like, it's just part of the process of getting the money out that you want to get out.
There's another one over here somewhere. Was it Councilor Davis? Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just remind, I guess, the council and the public that the intent of this ordinance is to, in some cases, prevent condo conversions, and in some cases, slow down the process of condo conversions, right? So the idea here that in some instances that we're bringing up, that there might be a homeowner that's going to have a difficult time evicting their tenants and turning that, rental unit into a condo. Yes, that's what we want here. So in some cases, I think that homeowner is going to decide to keep renting that unit, keep that as a rental unit. In some cases, they're going to decide to very slowly maybe save up the money that would be needed for those relocation fees, and maybe in the meantime let the tenant know that in some time in the future that's going to happen, so they can also have that planning and ability to save up. That's kind of the intent here. So thank you.
Councilor Morsillo, then Councilor Harvey.
Thank you. I want to make it clear that it's not my intent to slow down condo conversions. It never was. It was never the purpose of this to slow down or stop condo conversions. Condos still create an entry level to homeownership. And that's really important in this market too, because you can't buy a two-family anymore for less than $1 million, right? This is affordability in a different way. It's affordability for home ownership. It's affordability that builds generational wealth, right? This is entry-level housing right now. This was never my intent. My intent with this ordinance was tenant protections in a time when everyone is saying, what are we doing about affordability in Salem? Well, if we're displacing tenants to create condos, to create a different kind of affordability, we're not protecting those tenants that are living there right now. So my intent on this, and I will say this clearly, is tenant protection, helping them find a new place and helping them afford a new place. Thank you.
Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, President. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Hepworth, not being a member of the committee. I'm just going to go back to what Councilor Davis just brought up, talking about the landlord having a year to save money. Well, the tenant is given a year's notice prior to them having to move. So that gives them a year to save money for first and last also. So again, we're penalizing investors or property owners, I shouldn't even say investors, property owners that purchase their house with the intent of it being an investment property for their future. And now we're saying, well, thank you for saving and thank you for doing this, but now because you want to reap from your investment, we're going to charge you so much money because you want to take and kick somebody out. And that's just not fair to the person that purchased that property, whether they're old, new, whatever, as an investment property. And like you just said, if the tenant has, if the landlord has a year to save up for that $6,000, so does the tenant. Thank you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth, not being a member of the committee. I'd like to express support for what Councilor Morsillo had said earlier about the value of any property in this day and age. And also, in my experience of, in my work trying to assist people in finding apartments and also living in apartments, I don't think I know any that aren't, with the high price of rents, just meeting their rent every month. I don't know any that aren't struggling to afford food because their rent is so high. They would not have an opportunity to be saving. And they don't have the asset that a property owner has in place, as was expressed by Councilor Morsillo. And I also would like to, again, point out what Councilor Cohen had said, that this $6,000 is, I think the figure you landed on is 1.8% of what the value of that condo is going to be. So it's a small price to pay to try to slow down the displacement of renters. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. So I guess the order of events here, we have about 20 minutes left until the next meeting. I want to take a vote on this motion that's on the floor, allow for public comment if anyone would like to make public comment, and then take a motion on the final vote if there's a will to send this back to the council. So we have a motion on the floor from Councilor Cohen to add the 50% 15 days prior to moving out and 50% to 10 days within the date with which the tenant vacates. That was seconded by Councilor Varela. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? See 3 hands plus my own. Matter carries, or 4 hands, including my own. Okay, I'll take public comment right now. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the earlier applause, and I apologize. Thank you for
The first time that's happened.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Ed Sheldoni. I've lived in Salem since 1950. That makes me 74. And I don't speak in front of people a lot, although I do talk a lot, so bear with me, I'm a little nervous. But I just have to say I'm opposed to a number of things in this proposal, and I appreciate a lot of things that the council is doing and the attorney is doing, because it's a lot of work to get this stuff done and try and make things good in Salem. And that's what I want to see. But I've been a landlord. I live on 10 Lafayette Place. I own the house next door, which is a 2-family. I've owned other properties. I've rented them. My parents owned properties, 2 or 3 families in the city for years. And I used to manage them. There's a few things I want to talk about is first, last, and security, first of all. First, last, and security is totally up to the landlord to decide what they want. They can get first month, you talk to somebody, you talk to your tenants, you see what type of people they are, you look at their background and you decide, do I need the last month? Do I need a security? Do I want to work with them to say, look, give me the last month's rent 2 months down the road? So we work as landlords. Good landlords will work with people to be fair with tenants. But the tenants on the other side have to be fair with the landlords. And, you know, we're looking out for the tenants. And for doing rentals for 40 years, I've only had to go to court once. But in the last 10 years, I would say, tenants' rights are totally 100% in their favor. If I'm a landlord and I want to convert to a condo and I give them a notice in 1 year, now as the state recommends 1 year, and 1 year comes up and they don't move, you all know what happens. There's tenant rights advocates everywhere, and all they have to do is go down to City Hall or go to the tenant rights place, and they're going to tell them how not to pay the landlord and stay there for months and months and sometimes years. And I've talked to many people about this. I'm talking to one guy, Rob Engel, who owns a lot of property in the city, and he was just telling me he's asked a tenant to leave. They've been staying there for 6 months without paying rent. Where is the landlord's rights? Okay, tenants have rights, so don't landlords. You talk about saving money, okay? I'm 74, I'm still working, I'm a real estate agent. My mother worked 10 hours a day to support 5 kids, and then she bought property. So I say to the people that say the tenants don't have money, there's plenty of places that they can get work and work overtime instead of staying home and watching TV or whatever they do. So let them work. This is America. You can work and make more money if you want to work and make more money. Now, just my problem with my issue with some of the things here is the move-out costs. Okay, 1.6% of what you're going to sell it for, but it's going to cost, and I've done developments, as Patty knows, and it doesn't, if you're going to sell it for 300, you're probably going to put 150 into it. And in today's market, I've been looking for investments for myself. It's hard to find an investment right now that will make money for the owner. That's why a lot of properties are sitting on the market. And going to Councilor Marcello's comment too, this condo conversion is great for this economy for first-time home buyers. I am working with 2 buyers right now. One person can only spend $450,000. They want to buy a home. They're renting right now, okay? I'm working with another one. They can only pay $750,000 for a home. So these condos, is a great opportunity to somebody get a piece of the pie and start saving and getting those assets and getting that equity so they can build. So if they have to go out and work at night and work 2 or 3 extra hours, so let them go out and make some money, okay? So that's number one. So the $6,000, I know the state is $750, and I thought it was per household, but if it's per person, I wasn't aware of that. But I think that what the state has done, the $750 and the $1,000 is fair, and why do we have to go above and beyond? Okay? Salem is a beautiful place. It's gone leaps and bounds. We're building condominiums. We all know where they are. We're condominiums, rentals, and all that stuff. There's a lot of tenant spaces coming up, which is going to hurt some of the 2- and 3-family owners like myself trying to rent them when these brand new ones open up and they're renting them. So, you know, we need to help these landlords, okay? They worked hard for their money. I worked hard. I've owned businesses, and I've worked 7 days a week my whole life, and there's a lot of people out there, just like my counselor, who's worked to get his property. And why should we be telling them that we got to spend $6,000 to give you notice so you can move? They get their first month, they get their last month and their security deposit back. They get that. They're not losing that. They'll get that. So that's one of my issues. And, you know, the state is 1 year, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the state, this ordinance of the state, isn't it for non-owner occupied owners? No, okay, all right, no, all right, so that's what I was under the impression of. I made a note when I was reading the rights from the state, okay? Okay, so no dialogue, okay, thank you, okay. And also, one other thing, $600, I think somebody else mentioned it before, $600 for an application fee. I think that's a little excessive, so I agree with what the state's policy is. I really wasn't aware that that was in effect, so I learned something, and I appreciate all the work everybody's doing here, but I just would ask everybody for change to look at the property owners who pay the taxes, who work hard to get ahead. And you know what? The people that need more money, there's jobs out there. Go get the jobs. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Whoever's next.
Hey, good evening. I'm also a little nervous to get up here, so please bear with me. My name's Alex Rice. I reside in 99 Mason Street in a 2-family. I also own 97 Mason Street, the 2-family next to us. If you've ever driven around that corner, you might remember these used to be kind of dilapidated nuisance properties. I bought these properties. I own or occupy one. I did a lot of work, and I put a lot of resources into them myself. These properties are now nice, and my wife and I live in one. We rent the one next door. As the previous gentleman said, we put about $150,000 into each unit, and that's with me doing a lot of the work myself. So if you look at what we paid for them, plus the work that we put into it, right, you know, we don't have a ton of equity in there. And my plan was always to live there, you know, be a good landlord, and at some point, you know, to sell those as condos. And obviously now this creates a great deal of stress for me. You know, I am one of those mom and pop people. I live in Salem. You know, I also work in real estate and construction, and I do think, you know, I guess I'll back up. I appreciate that the goal of this is to protect tenants being displaced, and I definitely agree that we have a housing crisis, and that is a serious issue. What I do wonder is how big an effect this will actually have on that, right? If you look at the list of about the 50 condos that I looked at briefly, I do agree at least some, if not many of those, were not previous rentals. They are new units that have been built, right? Or there's a 2-family where now there's 5 units that have been created. So if maybe there's only 30 units, we're talking about a very small percentage of the housing stock. So if the goal of this is really to address tenant relocation, why aren't we doing that unilaterally versus going after a situation that is a very small percentage of what is actually happening? You know, I can also say, as someone that works in real estate full-time in Salem, it does seem like some of the things being said are a little out of touch, respectfully in my opinion, of what actually happens, right? Many people that own 2 or 3 units currently are not investors. They're people like myself that wanted to fix up a unit, or they've inherited it, or, you know, they want a little of the rental income. So it's really, I think, local people, that are part of the community, not these outside developers that are going to be affected by this. And the people that are going to be able to capitalize if in Salem, the average 3-bedroom condo is over $700,000. In Somerville, the average 2-bedroom condo is over $900,000, and the average 3-bedroom is over $1.1 million. So I do think, while we might be addressing a very small portion of tenants being displaced, we're going to have unintended consequences of potentially raising the prices of condos. I think we're going to unfairly penalize local people like myself. And you may also find that some of these properties, like the 2 that I bought, people aren't going to buy and improve because the numbers don't work. They're going to hold them as rentals, which lowers the quality potentially for the neighborhood, lowers the tax basis. So while I do think the intent here is good, I do think this is a little premature, and I think some of the data is incomplete. So I'd at the very least urge the city council to get more in touch with people that actually work with these things on a day-to-day basis and get more concrete data and base those decisions on that versus the sentiment that developers and landlords are these, wealthy people, that have all this extra money. And I'll end with this. I can tell you, because I see my tenant applications, many of my tenants make more money than I do and have more money in their bank account and drive nicer cars than I do. Thank you.
Okay, as we continue with public comment here, I'd remind everybody to please avoid disparaging renters as a group. Anybody else?
Hello, my name's John Williams. I own property at 210 North Street, owned it since 1979. I bought the house, 3-family, to, buy a single-family house. I'm hearing from the rents here. I'm evidently too low on my rents. I'm going up next week. I'm not paying enough. But anyways, the thing is, like Councilor Harvey said, what about tenants' rights, owners' rights? What rights we have? It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. It's out of control as far as I'm concerned. Now, out of the whole state, there's 12 towns and cities that have different policies for, with the condo conversion, more are better than the state. Salem is one of them. So how many cities in town? There's 351 cities in the town. And that comes to 3.13% of cities and towns of the whole state is making harder for owners to condoize, which I'm not going to condoize right now, to tell you the truth, but it's the principle. If I want to condoize, I want to be held liable for $6,000, $8,000 to pay people. It's going to be $24,000 to get people out of my house. I bought the house. I worked for the house. I shouldn't have to pay $24,000 for people to move. It's absolutely crazy. This is what I'm going to say. I think it's absolutely nuts. But believe me, my rents are low, so they've been there for 10, 15 years, so it must be low. But to say if I want some, or my kids want to condo-wise and pay $24,000, I'm sorry, it's nuts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Lydia King, 4 Forest Avenue. I'll be brief. I just want to talk about the empowerment that comes from something like this. I'm lucky enough now to live with my partner who owns our home, but a few years ago I was living in a larger rental complex in Salem, and we were experiencing a lot of issues. We had like pests in a lot of the first floor and ground floor apartments. We had issues with waste not being taken away from the property. We had issues with like major security problems with the properties. We had them breaking noise ordinances, just like all over the place, lots of issues. And we as a group of tenants were trying to just ask our landlords to do like basic things that should have been included as part of just the social contract between us and our landlord. And we actually ended up working with Lori in this City Hall, and she helped advise us on how best to advocate for ourselves. But it was really interesting because we hit a point with the organizing where people got really scared. They got really scared about asking for things that really should have been basic rights for tenants, and they got really scared that the complex was going to go condo, and they were all going to be thrown out with no safety net at all. And it really stopped, to some degree, what should have been just basic human decency conversations, because people got really scared. So as a city doing something like this, that really does add some protections for tenants. I think it really signals to people like that. And these are people who mostly were people who had tried to downsize from their homes into these apartments because the building had elevators. So it was a place that you could like age in place. And these people were really terrified they were going to lose their place where they were planning to stay for the rest of their lives. So this is very empowering to tenants like that. And I really appreciate you all prioritizing that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we have another motion. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I'd like to make a motion that we send this ordinance to amend an ordinance relative to condominium conversions to the full council as a positive recommendation as amended.
Councilor Varela moves to refer back to the full council with a positive recommendation as amended, seconded by Councilor Cohen. I wasn't looking at you. I was just looking in general at the, seconded by Councilor Cohen. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Other motion.
Can I just make a comment?
Councilor Morsillo.
I just wanted to make one comment. That state law that specifies the $750 and $1,000 was written in 1983. 1983. That's why our amount isn't $1,000, because it was written in 1983. I think everyone's raised their rent since 1983. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. And motion to adjourn.
Councilor Morsillo moves to adjourn. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I'm not going to say I'm going to be brief, because I am going to be. There are great landlords. There are great tenants. However, I'm a landlord, and in the end, I have the power. It's my place. I can decide who lives there. Yeah, I've had lots of issues with people doing stuff, but bottom line is, I want it to be the tenant's home, but it's still my property, okay? So in the end, the entity that has the ultimate power in this relationship is the landlord. Thank you.
All right, motion on the floor is to adjourn by Councilor Morsillo. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.